Okay, awesome. Thanks so much. And I was just talking to students about the nature of the assignment. And when you're creating a stock, the stock should belong to an industry, so you're probably doing that. And we're saying, a good stock should have membership in about 20 different industries. It also should start with a random price, and the price should be generated randomly. But also, it should have a symbol. And we were just talking about the nature of stock symbols. Most stocks have a couple of letters. Now, if you're an old line stock, for example, AT&T, you can get away with just having one letter, and that's because you're on the New York Stock Exchange. Other companies are younger, like your Cisco. AT&T is pretty traditional. AT&T was a hot stock, 60 years ago. Cisco is one of the cool 90s stocks. You notice that it's CSCO because it's trading on the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ is an electronic exchange from the get-go, and it includes a lot of tech IPOs, and that's where it built its premise. But what I want to focus on, not necessarily the index, its market, but its symbol in itself. So in the requirement, you should have that symbol, and the symbol should be 4 letters long. So if you were to make a stock market with 6,000 symbols, probably you should generate those symbols randomly. And so let's begin this meditation, begin this thought process on how to make a symbol. Now, from last time we talked, I made the hound dog class, and I imagine that's where there's a hound dog going on there, and you should probably take hound dog out, because unfortunately we won't be able to make any hound dogs. So my children will be a little disappointed we won't have hound dogs in this program, but you guys should be relieved that you don't need to code any hound dogs. But we are interested in the creation of stocks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Control, and I'm going to go to my stock class. You see how I just kind of went right to I Control clicked that, and I went right to my stock class. And you realize that it's got a symbol right there. And we don't have any, we're not really working with the symbol quite yet. Like, for example, we create the symbol right here, but maybe we create a mechanism whereby we automatically create the symbol. And we run a routine called set the symbol. And so let's build that up. We'll create a method called set symbol. Great. Now the reason why it says string is because we want to return a string so that we can initialize that symbol. So the first way we want to make is because we're going to have a return value of a string, we actually want to establish a string called our return value. This will be what we'll return to the calling function. And then what we'll do is we'll say we're going to return value, just like that. And let's check out what did I do wrong? And it's not been initialized. And so we'll initialize that variable with a null identifier. Now null is a very good word for us to talk about. And null is really like a shoebox with no shoes in it is a good analogy for a null value, where you're expecting there to be a value, but there's actually emptiness. It's actually, there's nothing there, it's void, there's nothing there. And so we could initialize it with something, like we could create a string that's like this. That's what's called a null string. But we could also do it the fancy technical way and just say, okay, that's null. Now, probably we want to say there's a variable called first letter, and we want to create a function called getRandom letter. And you guys are going to be good at this one because I'm going to create that method. And we're going to create that random number. It's going to be that new random. And maybe what we'll do is we'll say integer character result is going to be r.nextInt. That'd be fine. And maybe you can divide it by 1,000,000. And then you'll come up with a relatively small number. And you can kind of check that by saying, here's my character result. And then you can sort of say if that character result is less than or equal to, say, 10 million. And we'll have to work with the ranges. Oh, let's bring that together. Maybe that, and then what we'll do is we'll return a particular character. Now you realize that our result here is going to be a string, so we should create a string right at the top. It's going to be called a result, and that will be equal to a null string. So you can also say this. You can also say this. Either will be fine. And then what we'll do is we'll return that. So we're going to return that result. But if our result, maybe our result is going to be equal to A. Now, if just so that we have a result when we test it, else we'd say that our result is going to be equal to a B. Now understand there's going to be 26 other, there's going to be 26 characters possible, you know, A through Z. So probably there needs to be 26 different return values possible here. So that's something I'm going to let you guys work on a little bit. You probably don't need me to do this all the way right here. But you realize that I'm coming up with a pretty legal set of statements right here, which is not bad. And I'm also using my method as a way to kind of offshore the work into a different part of the program. I just want to verify that we're recording here. Great, I see it's working. Fantastic. So if my first letter is going to be the result of this function right here, get random letter, then probably I can say system.out.println, my resulting character was my first letter. Now what's interesting about that is that for my markets symbol, run this character getting routine 4 times, or 4x, and deliver a symbol that contains 4 letters, A through Z, randomly. And that will create the basis for our simulation. Now, one of the cool things about coding live for you guys is sometimes I can make mistakes, it's fine. But what I want to do is I want to make a certain amount of mistakes and then I want to correct so that you guys have some running code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out the very beginnings here. Now that's my first letter, is get random letter. Now you realize that symbol is going to be the variable that I'm going to be updating as I do this. So let me say this. How many letters do I need in a stock symbol? Yep, I need at least 1. Yep, that's right. And how about we try to go for 4? You know, 4 is a good one. So let me say this. Now our 4 is roughly our limit. It's going to be 4. We need, you know, 4 characters to compose one valid stock symbol. like Apple, for example. So what I want to do is I want to initialize a variable at 0. Then I say while I is less than or equal to 4, I want you to change that variable one time. And for every one of those variables, and I want to compose it as int I, what is this is going to do? It's going to start at 0 and move up to 4, one increment at a time. And so it's a little bit of a counting mechanism. And this is the for loop. So there's really only 3 parts. This is the start, that's the limit, and that's the amount that it can climb or increase every time. And if you can understand those 3 parts about the for loop, you're sitting pretty. All advanced algorithms are based upon for loops and understanding what for loop's all about. Now what's cool about the for loop is that we have that incremental value of I. That's what I want to encourage you all to be developers. Because if you can grasp the idea of a for loop, then you can work with very large piles of data, and then you can really provide very, very valuable services to companies who want to generate lots of data and who want to have people who are willing to help them understand data. Does that make sense? It's a data-driven future. The for loop is the core of that data-driven future. So if you like a for loop, try to figure out the for loop. Spend your time on the for loop. It'll be the hardest thing that you study this term. And you'll probably get it by the end of this video. So here's what I want to exhibit. I want to say, right, increment is now at, and I want to show off what I is right there. Now what's kind of fun about this is, you know that I can increment a character, a string, by calling getRandomLetter. That looks pretty good to me. So why don't we just kind of try this right now? And why don't we see if we make some mistakes? So what if I run getRandomLetter 4 different times? Couldn't I get 4 different letters? So what if I said string L is going to be the result of getRandomLetter? That's pretty cool. So that means that getRandomLetter is going to get called really 4 different times. And that what if we said, take the symbol and say that now the symbol is equal to whatever it currently is plus that L. And so what will happen with symbol is first it will look like this. First it will look like maybe A, and then maybe AA, and then maybe AAB, then maybe AABB. Maybe, or it could be BA, right? Or it could be, AAB, right? It could look like that even. So why don't we say BA? That's roughly what is going to happen over the course of this runtime. Now I'd like to run an experiment where set symbol is kind of the subject of my experiment, but I don't want to complicate it too much. So I don't want for there to be too much output. So I want to turn off some of these outputs, so that my stock's initialization is very simple. And then I can turn those printing mechanisms back on later. I want you guys to always be doing system out. And so what I want to do is I want to set these IPOs and set the industry and set the stock price, set the symbol. That looks good to me. And getRandomLetter is also going to be rather chatty. So we'll be able to check the random integer. And then we should be able to check out the result of that as well. And so why don't we do this? I want to go system.out.println, and we'll say the symbol is now. And if I make some errors here, I'm just going to be humble and say, errors are always possible. If we get it going great on our first try, great. But if not, let's just work with it. Okay, so let's say set symbol is going to get defined, and it looks pretty good. So what I do is I give it a run just to kind of see where I'm at, just to see how complete I am. Oh, interesting. It's actually running another program that I was working on today. So let's make it run the Brain Center. versus some of my, okay, great. So there's a couple of interesting things that are happening right here. Firstly, it's giving me some interesting stuff. Now, when I run my constructor, all I'm doing is this, keeping it real simple. Now, it's going to set all this stuff like IPO, quantity, and industry and stock price. But really all I'm asking for is the symbol related stuff to do a little output. So it'll be making noise relative to, so the increment is now at 0. So that's the first thing it does. Now you see how I starts at 0, so it's now at 0. Then a random integer was set because it's calling random letter. So now the symbol is now A. And then the increment goes to 1, and it adds another letter, A and B. And now we'll figure out where null is coming from. We'll figure that out in a sec. Symbol is now null, AB. It looks like it gets a null at some point. And now the increment goes to 2, and then it goes to 3, and the random integer gives us some guidance. And then I get a stock symbol of ABBA right at the very end. Now that's interesting to me, and I'd like to find out a little bit more about where that null comes from. And people may be making fun of me on the net at this point because I messed something up, and that's fine. I'd like to be the rodeo clown of programming if so. But what I wouldn't mind doing is to say system.out.println. Now my symbol is at, and if I just go ahead and turn off my YouTube camera and just fix an error, I'll come back and I'll tell you what I fixed. That's fine. But what we'll do right now is I'll say, well, look, L is my stock, and then one of the values that it can see is my symbol. So I'll go ahead and say, what's my symbol now? And I'll turn off some of the other printing maybe, because I don't think I need my, I don't need this. What's kind of fun is result begins at null. And maybe the result comes back as null at one point. So let's take away some of these notes too, so it becomes even more. You see how comments are a godsend, but too much of any good given thing becomes a weakness. If anybody ever asks you, what is your weakness? You always say, you know what? A weakness is a strength overplayed. So whatever your strength is, if you ever do a little too much of that strength, it becomes a weakness. Does that make sense? That's your correct answer. So let's go. Symbol is now ABA. Okay, now my symbol is at null. So I'm going to fix that while we're away. But we're roughly having the ability to generate a symbol for this stock, in addition to its other statistics. So I can promise you that there's other good stuff happening here where, and my price is L.price. Oh, and actually, why don't I just say L.print my price and IPO quantity, and that should facilitate a little bit more of the proof process. And it looks like I'm creating an education stock that has released this many stock with this price, and my symbol is coming up null right there. So I'm going to debug that while I'm away, and when I come back on my next YouTube episode, we'll televise the fix. So, but it looks like our symbol is initializing, and we're getting a different stock symbol, which is good. ABBB, ABAB, which is good. And let's do it one more time. ABAB, BAB. So we're able to run that kind of symbol initialization process, and we'll go back and refine. So I appreciate that. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and just remember to click subscribe